So, how we perceive the universe is in two dimensions. Because consider what we see. What we the image is a two-dimensional image, but our minds brings up the three-dimensional effect of it because we're three-dimensional beings, so we understand we are in three dimensions. So based on light distortion, color variation and other factors, the brain has learned to process all this information to give a rather accurate image or rather picture of it in three dimensions. So that's because we're three-dimensional beings, but we see in two-dimensional. So a four-dimensional being would actually see a three-dimensional image. Yeah, exactly. And it's its mind that discerns the picture in four dimensions. So we consider something as time as the fourth dimension. So basically this three-dimensional space and dimension of time. So the four-dimensional being would see all of three-dimensional space, unlike we only see the two-dimensional space. A three-dimensional being will see the three-dimensional space, and its mind will process how it is in relation of time. So we go back to three-dimensional beings. So since we perceive, we actually take a two-dimensional image and process it to a three-dimensional picture. We see the universe as a two-dimensional sheet. Yeah, sheet. But this three-dimensional sheet is stacked on layers. Multiple layers, infinitely long, infinitely thin. And so that's the stacking through time, all the layers stacked in time, like a story, like a storybook. So how each page carries the same story, each sheet just tells a part of the story. So they are basically infinitely long, infinitely thin pages. And so how you read the story, you read it through time. It's the same effect that we see in the world we perceive, our world, okay, our world basically. Yeah. So those are each page of a storybook. And now we see how being part of the story will affect it. So an object like the sun, where it has a particular mass, a very large mass. So the matter of it is how it affects the story. And so we see a dent in it. Basically, it curves space time. So it's like a dent in the page. So in that page, it's rather flat, but the sun being in that page makes the page to sort of drop in accordance to the shape of the matter. So it drops, causing the other pages to also sort of drop accordingly, because I don't know if they can mix, but I assume they don't. So you see all these pages dropping in a particular direction, so sort of pointing downwards, and in this curvature where it's sort of looping, it causes a sort of sinkhole. For there are other pieces of matter in the same page, so how they're they're causing their sort of drop, it's also being lugged into that bigger matter. And how we see it with our sun is it's rotating and revolving at a particular state. So on the earth, we are sort of falling towards the sun, but since we don't actually see it happening that way, it's because we are rotating around it. So that energy causes sort of being pushed away. It's like falling from a particular height. Based on your mass, you'll fall at a constant, at a certain velocity, until you reach, is it terminal velocity? I don't know. But at a particular point, you'll start falling at the same velocity. The rate of constant acceleration is sort of reaches zero, gets to zero. Yeah. So this is how we are going towards the sun. We reached a particular state of drop, like we are falling into the sinkhole, but due to the rotation around the sun, we've been able to reach at a certain rate where we can't go in or we can't be pulled out. So we're just at a sort of constant rate of distance. Yeah, it's actually sort of distance. So that's how fast we go into that part of the page. And so that's how basically gravity works. We're being pulled to sides, sort of that pull towards something, or that, and that's how eventually you can have a constant stay on it. Yeah. So how this affects going through time is, if you have a heavy enough matter, sort of like a black hole, it might actually tear into the story, to the pages of the storybook, and that way there's a means to access all these other pages. So though you are at a particular page constantly, here you have a sort of freedom to move into every other page. And this is what we see with sort of a wormhole effect. Yeah, it's sort of a wormhole. Because considering the multiverse story, at a particular point in time, we were a particular other universe, probably. So we might actually go to that particular universe. It might be at a different point in time, but it is the same story. For this, we can actually consider that how they're infinitely thin. Being a story, it's basically a collection of data, and considering data can be processed and sort of three-dimensional reprojection can be made, like in a computer. So we may consider that those infinitely thin pages have much thinner lines in them, which are the words of the story. And these words in that story are on pages made of a fabric that makes the paper. And so in this fabric, we see how basically each and every word is woven into the book itself, because it's at a particular point in that fabric that has the ink that writes the words of the story. So this fabric, where it is, dictates what is, because it had to be at that particular point to get that particular stain of ink that writes that particular story. And in such manner, it dictates how the story itself is reprojected into a 3D visualization, to a 4D visualization, to a 5D, 6D, and so on. It's at dimension 0, where it has to start, where it's nothing but a point in that thread that dictates what the outcome will be. For without that particular section of thread, there may be a distortion in some manner, and so making the story completely different. But then, this thread itself seems to be infinitely long, so any manner of distortion is actually accounted for. So it itself becomes part of a different part of the story, an existing one, but not the exact one. So we get how something can be accounted for, despite this being at a infinitely long set in time, because considering how long it has to exist so that to play out each and every part of the story, it will take a tremendously long time, for there are multiple factors that have to come to play, that have to be crossed to reach a particular certain time. Because consider that section of thread actually to actually come into existence and bring out the point of existence we're at, it wouldn't actually take billions of years or a billion times number of years. It would take a lot. Actually, we won't have to measure in years anymore. We'd have to find a much lengthier set of time measurement to actually perceive how how long it will take, because we're told just the human existence in this earth of ours, we've been here for how long? Life itself, or let's say the earth itself, is it 3 billion years or something? And then life on it has existed for a fraction of it, and another fraction involves more of evolution, survival. In another fraction of it, now we see humanity, and an even smaller fraction of it where we have written records. So actually, we are even hardly a blink in existence. Looking for that fraction in the entire fraction, we are hardly even a fraction. So I guess no matter how much bigger we are in terms of size to the section of it that makes the fabric, still we couldn't actually exist for as long as it's existed, because the moment someone dies, it's basically their part of the story has just ended in a vast length of an entire story, which had to write how it has to all exist, then to actually trying to make it exist, to actually have it exist, to actually have the story that you had in mind play out, and all the while considering each and every factor that won't alter the story, and so making an infinitely long number of sidelines, which also you have an intention of having it play out as you want it to play out. So we are just another factor that also affects the story.